Redditors who grew up in the third world, what surprised you most about the first world? Story 1. The size of everything. I was picked up from the airport in a Ford Expedition, which was about the size of my house back in Cuba, and then taken to a 6-bedroom house. I remember I used to feel uncomfortable in the big room, so I would hang out in closets and whatnot at first. On a side note, right before I left, my older brother told me that in the US, you could tell the toilet to wipe you and a hand would come out of the back to gently wipe your bottom. He went on to specify that I must ask in English because if I asked in Spanish, the hand would put a finger in my ass. I didn't poo for a week. So I guess another surprise was normal toilets. Also, my brother made it out of Cuba as well and laughs hysterically anytime this story comes up. I've yet to get back at him. Story 2. Honduran here who moved to Germany. Being able to walk in the streets with your phone in your hand was a bizarre feeling. How everyone was on time. Passengers on trains have little to no instructions and mayhem doesn't break loose. Being able to find a ride online from a stranger and not be murdered along the way. How everyone respected convention. Once I saw a hat on the floor for about as long as I sat there and no one picked it up. In Honduras, it'd been gone in less than a heartbeat. So I finally didn't really need a car. I was able to take public transportation with my expensive headphones, book, and smartphone in full view. Story 3. I grew up in Kenya as a child, and when I finally returned to the first world, I was surprised at how relaxed everyone was about not being mugged. I worked at a hospital in Kenya, and the interns there wouldn't let my brother or I go home walk-in after 7 p.m. because they said it was just too dangerous. We were staying at a church 500 meters down the road that wouldn't take more than 3 minutes to get to. Constantly, people would tell us to watch our valuables, and it became so pessimistic that when we left, we were left in that mindset for about a month. I was working in surgery my first morning in the hospital and 2 men with head injuries came in. The nurses there told me that there had been a hijacking at a petrol station at 4 in the morning that day. They had pulled machetes and slaughtered 4 people right there and then. I left 3 weeks later. Guy 1 was barely responsive, still couldn't talk, but could move his eyes. A vegetable pretty much. Guy 2 was being discharged when I left. Story 4. When I came to Canada, it terrified me that people were so nice, especially when it came to traffic. The first few times it happened, I didn't know what the hell was going on. I'd be standing in the little gap between the traffic signal and pavement looking at this car that starts slowing down 20 meters in advance. While I watch it, expecting it to go past so I can cross the road, it stops. And then the driver makes a little hand motion thingy and I'm standing there thinking, do you want me to go? Do you want to go first? What is this? Is this protocol? Is this what it is, how it is, done here? Do you wait for me? I, as a pedestrian, have rights and not a bullseye in my face? Spent the first year or so just freezing like deer in headlights every time I had to cross a road because a lifetime of playing traffic Frogger in Karachi did not leave me with the impression that drivers knew what the brake was for. And Canadians, so nice, it's damn terrifying. Story 5. My uncle joined the Peace Corps and I live in Tonga, a tiny island in the Pacific, for 2 years. One of his friends from his time there went on a trip to the US and my uncle met her in LA. Anyhow, they got into a cab at the airport, and my uncle said that his friend had this terrible look of anxiety on her face and just kept looking around. Her head was just darting around every which way. He asked if everything was all right, and she said she was waiting for the high-speed chases, gunfire, and explosions. My uncle had to explain that those sorts of things typically only happen in the movies. For her, the only window into the world outside of Tonga was the movies she had seen. It's interesting how media, or the lack thereof, can shape someone's perceived reality of the world. Story 6. Roads are smoother. There are traffic laws and most people abide by them. People honk in the third world to tell you that they're there. The first world, honks are used mainly for road raging. People bargain more in third world. Refrigeration isn't standard in third world. Things in refrigerators or coolers at the market are just lit and blowing lukewarm air. Ice is uncommon. If it is around, it's possible it came from a block of ice. Customer service exists in the first world. Third world, you eat what's being made even if it is bad or made incorrectly. Don't like it? Well, too bad. Fruits are better in the third world. First world fruits, most of the time, are picked before being ripe and shipped. Diet soda options are everywhere. Both Pepsi and Coke options are also everywhere. Water in most first world countries is drinkable by tap. Third world, not so much. Depending on where you are, showers and toilets are combined. No flushing TP down the toilet in third world countries. Most streets are clean in the first world, but trash, litter, garbage is everywhere in the third world. There is no concept of a line in third world countries, sadly even in China and the Middle East as well. Story 7. Let me tell you a story. For the first few years of my life, I lived in a rainforest in a little leaf hut with my grandmother. No electricity, no running water, no cars. It was literally a rainforest, and I had no idea what the outside world was like. My father, who lived in Australia, he was deported from my country because my family didn't like him, then decided that at age 7, I would have to come to Australia for my education. The whole experience was surreal to me. I remember flying on a plane and being so confused at how such a heavy thing could even fly. Even the lights were amazing to me. Turning them on and off was like magic to my mind. When I landed in Australia, my father asked me if I wanted a drink of water, and my reply was, "There doesn't seem to be a river anywhere nearby, so how are we going to get it?" My dad then showed me a tap, and my mind was just blown. Where was the river where this water was coming from? The refrigerator also blew my mind. In the village, if we had meat, we would eat it immediately, otherwise, and here was as this magic machine that preserved it. He later asked if I wanted to go to the grocery store to get food for dinner. I replied with, "You don't have to grow your own food?" My dad chuckled and we went to the grocery store. I was amazed, to say the least. Most of these foods I'd never seen in my life, and there was so much of them. Also, I could eat any meat I wanted? What? I could keep going on with things that amazed me, but really, there were just so many. Story 8. Everything just works. Banks have no armed guards, and while you're banking, you have no fear that someone at the bank is spotting to see if you take money out, only to rob you a block away. You stop at a traffic light at 3 a.m. and you actually wait for it to turn green again. You just don't do a rolling stop and then run the light for fear of someone hiding in the bushes nearby jumping at you to take your car. A package is delivered to your front door while you're away, and you can be 99.9% sure it will still be there by the time you make it home and nobody's going to steal it. If you have a problem with a company or a product, you can be reasonably certain that the company will try to make it right, not just laugh when you call to complain. If you call the police, they'll actually come to your house. Same for ambulances and firefighters. You pay taxes, but you have good roads, hospitals, police, and infrastructure, phones, streetlights, water, etc. Politicians caught stealing are out of public life with no hope of being elected again. Streets are generally clean and free of graffiti. If you need the justice system, it works reasonably well. Nobody is going to get away with murder because they have connections to a judge. All of these things are non-existent in the third world. Story 9. I lived in Indonesia for 7 years of my childhood, ages 3 to 10, on the island of Sumatra. Now, from a child's perspective, the biggest change was how rarely kids go outside in first world countries. When kids in Indonesia get bored, they go outside by default. I learned to play soccer with a ball that was pretty much rags and flip-flops or barefoot on concrete. It was all we did, just play outside. When I got home from school, the first thing I would do was step outside, and there was always some neighbor friend who was already out there having fun. Then we moved back to the US, and suddenly nobody was outside. The street at our first house in the States had just as many kids my age as my street in Indonesia did, or even. But if I went outside and rode a bike or kicked a ball around, I could be out there for hours without ever seeing another kid. I guess because in first world countries we have so many passive indoor activities that we can enjoy by ourselves or with only people we invite over, that there's no longer a need to go outside for entertainment. And that took a lot of getting used to. Also, pants. Indonesia's on the equator, so I literally never wore pants, just shorts. I even called pants long shorts for a long time. And vacuum cleaners terrified me because all the floor there is tile to fight the heat, plus tile is cheap. Both of those things were just culture shock, though. They don't have a lot to do with a third first world transition. Damn, I could talk for days about this. Honestly, I think the world would be a much better place if every kid spent a year or two of their formative years in another country, or at least a different region of their country. It's such a big part of who I am in so many ways. Story 10. As a 9-year-old coming to Chicago from the Philippines, a lot of things definitely caught me by surprise. Before arriving in America, I thought that everything was supposed to look like the video game Sims, boxy houses in the suburbs with clean-cut grass and the most regal people imaginable. Instead, I saw many similarities with the Philippines, especially in the urban areas. The poverty, the beggars, and the hardship that many people face really caught me off guard. I used to think that the United States was the closest thing to heaven, and while I soon learned that America is certainly better overall, I was nevertheless surprised that many people did struggle in the mighty United States. Story 11. Mostly it comes down to expecting lower standards, then being surprised when standards are higher, and then realizing that your third world view is affecting how you live in the first world. Having lived in a first world country for 10 years now, the difference from when I came here to now is huge. Gone are the old attitudes towards sexuality, race, and money. You question how you ever thought life in a developing country was, well, normal. You question things openly, not in fear of reprisal. There's an open discourse on political issues. There aren't checkpoints at every intersection. People have an opportunity to be whatever they want to be. You notice things like trades jobs pay more relative to trades in a developing country. You get to see an economy in motion. You're served by a large, capable police force in the first world. Bribery is not rampant. Education is freely accessible. Electricity, running water, more than one national newspaper, a more open internet, access to information, great infrastructure for economic development, a chance to see public transit run efficiently, a ridiculous mixture of races and beliefs, a chance to know more than your limited worldview. And if you can't appreciate moving to a civilized part of the world, then maybe it should just chew you up and spit you out. I'm who I am today because I was given a chance to see things from a civilized point of view. Story 12. No community in the first world. I live in Southern California, so I do hear it's different in other places in America. Now, growing up, I knew all my neighbors. People would just walk into my house and show up for a quick bite to eat or coffee just because they were nearby. I currently live in a series of townhomes with most of my neighbors my age, and I know one of their names only because my roommate was hitting on her and freaked her out. Story 13. Small things made us happy, like playing on a dusty ground with a football, soccer ball, made of plastic bags strewn together into a ball with string, using small rocks as goalposts. Or we just walk around and, talk. No matter how hungry or poor people were, they found joy in something. And then when I moved to a wealthier country, my fellow peers were so moody and full of angst. Hanging out meant sitting together in a room playing Game Boys, this was the 90s, or watching movies with no actual personal interaction. Homemade pizza, cheaper, was a no-no. Food brought over had to be Domino's, etc. Oh, and God forbid you had to wear the same clothes to school. Ironically, in some schools, this actually makes you more elite. Story 14. The clean air. My first memory, and one that will stay with me till my last breath perhaps, was breathing in the clean, crisp air with a hint of pine. New York in late August, one of those weird New England weather days. Years have passed since, and my nose and lungs are pampered enough that they don't notice those subtle fragrances. Pine still remains my favorite scent, and every once in a while, on a crisp day sometime in fall, I find myself trying to recreate that moment. Story 15. Basically, America. Growing up in America really seemed like a magical place, like in the movies. I mean, I always imagined America as the ultimate country in the world. Everyone has amazing computers and technology, and you can grab blazing fast internet anywhere for free. People are nice, industrious, and care about important and meaningful things. America is a country that protects the world and fights against the bad guys because evil is bad. America is the country of heroes. Man, how many war movies I grew up watching. It was amazing. The brave soldiers doing amazing things and sacrificing themselves for the greater good. Americans have people like Kennedy, Lincoln, and the Founding Fathers. They have places like Hollywood and New York and, Vegas. So growing up in America was like heaven, a paradise everyone wanted to go to. I never quite got why my compatriots were so eager to immigrate to Spain and Italy when they could actually go and live the American dream. Not to mention go and see all those iconic places like the Grand Canyon, that park from Yogi the Bear, and Mount frickin' Rushmore. I mean, I learned English by watching one of their shows, Friends. When I read about things like the Bank of America, when I got into this website at first, I honestly could not believe my eyes. This whole Comcast thing, is this even real? The United States of America? Didn't both Microsoft and Apple come from here? IBM? Then I spent an unhealthy amount of time researching. I honestly think America is not a bad country by any means. Certainly not the hellhole some people made it out to be. There are a lot of horror stories about America and more pop up here and every day, but it's still an incredible country that has done incredible things. Just not the type of country I had made it out to be in my head, I guess. If I got anything at all from learning about this, though, I would recommend you watch Eisenhower's farewell speech where he warns America about the military-industrial complex. The way the man speaks really just brings a tear to my eye. I don't know exactly what it is, but it is my favorite speech, said by an Anglophone, by far. Story 16. Very little human contact and how everyone is okay with it. I was born in Canada, but I grew up mostly in Egypt. There, you never truly felt alone. Someone was always visiting, knocking on the door, asking for a cup of flowers or directions. You could hear people talk outside on the street, go out and watch their lives go about. You felt like you were a part of something even if you never left your home. Sure, the cars going by could get noisy, but in a way, the noise was good and calming. You always knew someone is around, the need for privacy just kind of melts away. When you hear yelling or screaming, people would usually rush to the windows or balconies to see what was happening, very often getting involved themselves. When someone yells, "Thief!" you could go and see members of the community running after them. Even during the revolution, people stepped into the roles of security and traffic, continuing the sense of being a part of the city and country, not just a member. In Canada, you don't really get that. If it's true that Canada has the friendliest people, then I couldn't bear to live in other Western countries. I guess I expected people to have more free time here since the traffic wasn't bad and people here had more money, but I guess that wasn't the case. People in Egypt get further on way less here and still have time for family and friends. Story 17. I've been working with refugee children, and the things that seemed to make their heads spin were junk food and personal safety. Someone has also mentioned the abundance of food, but these kids seem to be fascinated with the abundance of junk food. Coming from a place where they couldn't be picky with the food, they all of a sudden had some control over what went into their bodies and they only wanted junk all the time. Instilling the idea of meal times and healthy food choices into these kids can be tricky. As for personal safety, ideas of stranger danger were extrapolated and ideas such as road safety were undermined. One girl I spoke to was flabbergasted when I said that kids often play in their front yards here, and she thought it was silly that we had to wear helmets bike riding. She had a very every man for himself sort of attitude. Story 18. How calm everybody is. I remember everyone being paranoid, because you could get killed for checking your phone at 11 a.m. I walk with friends late at night, like 1 or 2 a.m., and they're all texting and Snapchatting. I'm like, what are you Are you insane? You're going to get us killed. Put that crap away. And then they're like, dude, chill. It's just a phone. It's just a phone that got my friend kidnapped. What the hell are you on about? What? For a phone? For real? You guys are demented. Yeah, I'm still pretty paranoid, but I guess I got used to it. Story 19. Okay, I actually have a legit story for once, although it's about a relative, not me. I live in Australia and have Vietnamese relatives. Once, a cousin who had lived in Vietnam his whole life came here to visit. When he arrived, he was so confused. Hey, what's all this grass in front of your house? It's our lawn, I replied. What's that? Where are the animals that graze on it? We don't have any. And by this point, he was beyond confused. He says, wait, so what do you do with it? Well, we just let it grow. Then when it gets too long, we cut it down and throw it away. I can honestly say with no hyperbole, I've never seen someone so confused. Story 20. Not sure if Vietnam counts as third world, but definitely developing. This was around 10-12 years ago. I was about 11 or 12 years old then. Holy hell, the highway. We landed in LA and seeing the 12-lane, both directions, highway in person was mind-blowing. Cars and just cars everywhere. Moving sidewalks at the airports. We had escalators, but moving sidewalks? That was a first. Glorious AC everywhere. Toilet paper. Yes, I was amazed by the amount of toilet paper available. There were channels that aired cartoons 24/7. Buffets and more buffets and Salisbury steaks. Of course, Toys R Us. Story 21. I'm from Mexico, and 4 years ago I had the opportunity to visit Japan, and it just totally blew my mind. Everyone is so respectful of your space, your time, and your health. One of the things that stuck with me was when we arrived at the building where we stayed during our trip. Next to the elevator, there were a pair of earrings glued to the wall with tape, and it was so weird that I had to ask, and they explained to me that someone lost them and the person who found them put them there so the owner could take them. Coming from a country with very high levels of violence and crime, I just couldn't believe it. I love Mexico, but I think we can learn a thing or two about Japanese society. Story 22. A few things. Roads aren't smooth and clean like glasses and mirrors. The girls are not promiscuous as portrayed in the MTV videos and movies. There are beggars, we just call them homeless people.